Afternoon, how are you? Well, it's a little chilly today. And this evening there may be a frost, 34 degrees, and we're beginning to see fall, both in the colors of the trees and in a nearby field that I went over to today, about 20 acres of corn they were cutting and putting in huge trucks. And because of the frost, Holly and I went off and got some hay for feed and for bedding, and so our pigs could gather up. Of course, some of them can't wait. They don't see the point of bedding. They don't believe what the weatherman says, so they've already been eating some of what could have been bedding. Others are smarter about it. Pigs are pretty smart animals. They can't see worth anything, but if you crack a nut 100 yards away, they will hear it and they will come to you. They can be trained a lot, and they have little piginalities, and they don't oink. They kind of grunt. So, I don't know, something like that. We need a good pig ventriloquist to carry that off. And so we had the other animals helping us, particularly Hera, our great dog. So, what do I think about today? Well, you know the old song, London Bridge is falling down. Russian bridges falling down, falling down, falling down. Of course, they weren't falling down. They were actually shot down. The Ukrainians have cut off the line of supply, and the Russians are quite upset about it and saying, well, it doesn't really matter a great deal. Then Putin's having a terrible season for his birthday because now he's trying to blame people, and he had a famous general, Dvornikov, I think that's how you say his name, who's been able to crush people in other locations like Syria, that he put as the Allied commander, and he's the first of a number of commanders to go to cover the fact that things are not going as well as they were. And you know, I'm sure that the United States has figured out a way to coordinate and be involved, and I think we had a smart partner too, that is to say the Ukraine. And I think Putin is right that this is a fight against the West, and that's what he wanted. He wanted, by defeating Ukraine, to be shaming the West and NATO and things like that. If you gave him a polygraph, he probably could beat it, but if he didn't beat it, I think that would be proven true. So Putin is terribly, I think, depressed about that. In the category of toxic black men, individuals chosen for running for office, not for what they believe in, but what they're prepared to say to have that assignment. And Herschel Walker has been a miserable failure in that regard. It doesn't have to be. You know, recruiting candidates, when done right, you get the best, you assume the best and the brightest. I always thought in New York there might be less corruption in judgeships because there were so many lawyers that it should be easy to satisfy the requirement of patronage by choosing a judge who was really great. Didn't happen all the time. So that was my wishful thinking. So we have Herschel Walker, and now it turns out he's actually sent notes to this woman. He really shouldn't have lied, and there was a way to tell the truth, and I don't want to take his part because he's a miserable human being and has no right to be on the ballot. There should be some minimal ability. You know, I wouldn't trust Walker to park my car, and I certainly wouldn't trust the thing he said. And yet, there are people in Georgia who are going to vote for him. What does that say about some percentage of our population, even in Georgia, who would do such a thing? And it suggests that the human is not always that rational. It's pretty discouraging. And the last thing that's on my mind, maybe, is about these children. There are, according to some study, 2.5 million kids in middle school and high school who are smoking these e-cigarettes and will be. Now, my dad, he smoked as a kid. He went in the service. They gave him cigarettes, and in his 60s, they were spiking the cigarettes so that people would, be driven by the nicotine. And ultimately, it turned my dad's lungs to a mass of white and black substances, reflecting the cancer that he had. And he and I talked about it somewhat, and in a moment of weakness, I asked a question that was inside my head, but that I would never have asked normally. And I asked him, was it worth it, smoking, to be brought to this at 68 years of age? And he said to me, there's always something that goes, like a car. You lose a fender or something, and there's a lot of truth in that. I have to wonder if they didn't spike those cigarettes, would he have lived longer? But the other thing that he did in those moments is he taught me something about death, which is that when he knew that he had no exit strategy, in a sense, to continue to live, he fasted. He ate and drank less. He was coherent to the end. He didn't take pain medication. I know a few people who would handle it that way, and it was something. Of course, he was of a generation that served in World War II. He was a street kid before that experience, and he had a hell of a mind and an ability. All of that said, I think we can do better by these 2.5 million kids. And taking poison like that, he spent all this time trying to prevent people from getting pain medication when they have chronic, unrelenting, nerve-bending pain that they're going to have the rest of their lives. And what about our kids? We talk about the children like we're always doing it for the children, when instead we don't really do that much. We don't care if they're shot. They don't care if they're educated. The Republican platform doesn't want there to be a public school. So anyhow, can go on about all these things. Being out in the country, breathing the air a lot is, exhilarating, I think. It's exhilarating today. And even though it's slightly overcast, but the weatherman, if he's right, says, don't worry, no rainstorms. And maybe that's true. So I'm glad to visit with you on the weekend that Christopher Columbus found America and thus began a genocide. It's a pretty terrible thing to talk about, isn't it? So I say goodbye to you in my cathedral of trees, and I look forward to talking to you again, and maybe I'll be of a more sober mind the next time.